When I first got into For Honor, I initially started with the Samurai faction because I was doing my minor in Asian Studies at the time, and I've been studying the samurai in Japan for a long time, and I felt more pulled to that just because of my education at the time. But I still loved all the other factions, the Knights and the Vikings. I thought that they were all cool, but of all of them, even among the samurai included in this, I still thought Lawbringer was the coolest dude in the entire cast. His armor looked awesome. His weapon, I argued, was the best weapon out of all of them. He felt imposing. He was huge. He was powerful. When I saw Lawbringer on the battlefield, I thought, shit's about to get real, I loved Holden Cross's design. I just thought that the Lawbringer was the coolest looking character in the entire cast. So you can pretty much tell that I was a huge Lawbringer fan. Eventually, of course, I did switch from the Samurai faction over to the Knight faction because, you know what, I decided that I wanted to go to my actual roots. And even when I switched over, Lawbringer was still awesome to me. I mean, we still had it where, Lawbringer got the new armor sets, which made him look amazing. His different helmets, his cape, his new weapon styles, all of it just looked so awesome. And of course, we all know his famous line, Ad mortem inomicus. When you hear him scream that line, you just know, oh, this guy. You just love him. He's become a really big fan favorite for a lot of For Honor players, and me included. I love Lawbringer. Which makes it sad to say that I think that of the characters in the game, he's one of the weaker ones. Now, that's not to say you can't get success out of him. I mean, you can play him pretty well. If you're smart about your timing and how you approach him and with your mix-ups, I mean, you can use Lawbringer effectively. But I feel like Lawbringer is one of the weaker characters in the cast because there's just not a lot you can use him for outside of parry punishes. I feel like his whole kit revolves around that. Other than parry punishes, you of course have a bash, which opens up for a free light, which you can follow up into an unblockable heavy, which then turns into a 50-50 game. Do they react by parrying, dodging, lighting you out of it, or do they eat it? Like all that kind of stuff. You got to know what they're going to do. It requires very good reads. And there are some players out there like John DeLiner and others who just take Lawbringer and run with him and do exceptionally well. I would argue John DeLiner is to Lawbringer what Havoc is to Warden. They're the ones who made these characters awesome to a lot of people. But even John DeLiner has said that Lawbringer is in a very bad place right now, and after some thinking about it, I have to agree. For one thing, I think one of the biggest problems I've always had with Lawbringer, and with the Knights in general, now that I think about it, is the huge lack of hyper armor on this character. I think it is a travesty that the faction that has the best armor out of all the other factions, the Knights, has less hyper armor than the Vikings, who have objectively less armor than the rest of the cast. I mean, if you count up the Vikings who have lots of hyper armor, you got Raider, you got Berserker, you got Warlord, you got Highlander, you got Jormungandr. Most of the Vikings have really good hyper armor, whereas with the Knights, most of them don't. A few may have one hyper armor move in their kit, but the vast majority do not have good hyper armor. And Lawbringer only recently, in his last update patch, got hyper armor on his second heavy. Which, yeah, sometimes that can be useful, but I don't feel like it's enough. When I think about Lawbringer, I think of him being more like Raider or Shugoki in terms of hyper armor. This dude who can just trade blows because he's got the armor with which to trade. Now, some may say that that's broken, and I don't know, maybe it is. Like I said, I'm not the best person to talk to in terms of mechanics and build and balancing. That's not my forte. But I feel like with Lawbringer, we should really have better hyper armor on this guy than he does have. I also feel like he needs a little bit better mix-up than what he has. I really do feel like he just doesn't have a whole lot in his kit that I think is very viable. Like, for example, his long arm is a situational move, and while it is really cool and memeable, but I mean, that's the thing. That's the meme about it, isn't it? Pulling it off can be very difficult. Whenever I see someone do a long arm montage, I'm always very impressed because I can't pull it off as well. And I think the other problem I have with Lawbringer is his kit doesn't allow for much beyond light parry punishes or dodge parry punishes. And the reason why I think this is a problem is there are lots of players out there, like myself, who are very casual in nature and don't react to every single light parry perfectly. We try, but we're just not going to be very good at it. And because of that, that means that we're losing out on a very big part of what makes Lawbringer good. Now, you could argue, well, that's a skill issue. And yes, you're right, it is a skill issue, but I would make the argument that if you have mastered the ability to parry lights, then every character in the roster will work well for you. If you can master light parries, there is no character you can't dominate with. So I would argue for those casual players who aren't as good at that, maybe the character needs more to their kit beyond just being able to light parry perfectly every time. Like for example, take Aphira or Shinobi. You don't have to be a master of light parries to still dominate the battlefield with these two characters. You know, they will still work because their move sets are good enough that you can have different kind of play styles with them. You can either focus on bash mix-up, 50-50s with their unblockables, wall splats. There are lots of ways you can use these characters beyond just light parry punishing. With Lawbringer, I feel like light parry punishing is probably the biggest tool in his kit. It's not the only tool in his kit, I'm not saying that, and again, I will reiterate, I don't think he is the worst. But I do think that he needs more than what he has, which is why I say Lawbringer makes me sad. I don't hate him. I love him. I love his design. I love his aesthetic. I love what he could be capable of. I love the idea of Lawbringer. When a Lawbringer walks out into the field, you know, everyone just shakes in their boots. Oh, man. It's the Lawbringer, this absolute armored tank with this awesome weapon. He's going to destroy us if we don't figure out how to deal with him. That's the way he should be. Instead, I see a lot of people just go, oh, look, it's the tank boy. All right, play with him. I do feel like Lawbringer can just be abused sometimes if you just don't know how to do those light parry punishes and if people are good at reading 50-50s. If people can read 50-50s really well and are light parriers, Lawbringer honestly turns into a joke for a lot of them. And I do feel like he needs something more. Don't ask me what. I'm not an expert in those things. And I know I'm going to get some comments from people saying skill issue or you're just not good at the game or you don't know what you're talking about. You know what? Say that if you want to. But my stance remains thus. I love Lawbringer. I love what he was. I love his appearance. I love his design. I love his weapon. I think Lawbringer is an exceptionally cool hero that made me love the Knight faction. Right now, where he currently is not where he belongs. Of all the Knights, I feel he is one of the weakest right now, and he shouldn't be. He should be one of the top tier characters. He should be right up there alongside characters like Blackprior, Griffin, Highlander, even I would argue Aphira, because this guy should be someone who absolutely terrifies the enemy team when he shows up, and instead I have heard people snicker. Legit, in a stream, I heard someone go, don't worry, they've got 3 Lawbringers, we can handle this, and I was like, oh crap. The worst thing I've seen Lawbringers do is they've just tried to impale people off of a ledge. That's the worst thing I've seen most Lawbringers do. But anyway, that's all I have to say about this. I hope you guys understand my position. Again, I don't hate Lawbringer. I really do like him. He just makes me sad because I know he could be better than what he is. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section, respectfully. And as always, I will see you in my next video. Take care.